My name is Irene Ghobrial. I'm a professor of medicine at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, and I'm here in AACR 2026 to discuss the CAR-PRISM study with Dr. Nadeem.
Hi, my name is Omar Nadeem. I'm a clinical investigator at Dana-Farber, assistant professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School. Excited to be here at AACR to discuss the CAR-PRISM trial. Yeah, so these patients have high-risk smoldering myeloma, which carries approximately a 50% chance of progression to multiple myeloma in 2 years. And there's been several studies done in this population with early intervention to see if they can lead to, disease control and maybe even disease eradication. So we aim to see whether CAR T-cell therapy, which is very potent therapy, can be given to patients with a more intact immune system in high-risk smoldering myeloma state to see if we can have curative potential.
I think the biggest issue we see with our patients, and we see so many of them, they come to see us and say, what are you waiting for? I have high-risk smoldering myeloma. This is not a pre-cancer. This is truly an early-stage cancer. And they don't want to have end organ damage. They don't want to wait until they have fractures in their bones, lytic lesions, anemia, renal failure. So it's really a decision that patients actually ask us, why are we waiting when we have amazing drugs that can give us an amazing remission, and yet we're waiting for them to advance their disease, to have more tumor burden, less immune responses in the later stages.
So cilta-cel was approved in 2022 for relapsed refractory myeloma. At that time, it was already showing really impressive results when it came to deep responses and a progression-free survival that was approaching about 3 years, a patient population. So we launched the study back then because we were already very impressed by the potential of cilta-cel in high-risk smoldering. What you're pointing out now is a 5-year follow-up of that initial trial, the CARTITUDE-1 study, showing that approximately a third of those patients are still progression-free, raising the possibility whether that has been curative therapy for those patients. So we don't really know that at that time, although we were hoping that would be the case. And now seeing the results of our own trial, I think we're very encouraged by what we're seeing. And it seems to be obviously trending, far greater in terms of activity than those relapsed refractory patients.
Yeah, I think just a month ago, we had the Cure Summit in multiple myeloma. For the first time, we're defining what a cure is. And it's an amazing time for us because I've been in practice for over 20 years when we still had melphalan and prednisone, when we were just starting the era of novel therapy. And now we're in the era of immunotherapy. And the hypothesis we had was if you use your best immunotherapy early, when your T-cell fitness is as best as possible early on and you have less tumor burden, this potentially could work even better than relapsed refractory setting. We didn't even know about cure, but the hypothesis was maybe this will be a curative intent in our patients. And we're hoping, yes, we're not there at the 5 years yet for our patients. Some of them are 2.5 years. But the fact that they receive their own T cells and nothing else, no induction, no bridging therapy, and that's all they received, and they still had MRD negative 10 to the 6 with one therapy is an exciting time for us and definitely for our patients.
Yeah, I think this is really exciting data to show the potential of CAR T-cell therapy in this disease state. And, we're eager to see what the studies look like in frontline myeloma, whether it's going to show similar activity that we see in high-risk smoldering myeloma. There's also lots of trials ongoing looking at bispecific antibodies in high-risk smoldering myeloma and newly diagnosed myeloma. But I think it's very clear that any of these T-cell redirecting therapies really have tremendous benefit earlier you give it. And we hope that this trial, findings from this trial will lead to even more studies in this space using, other products or other, methods.
Yeah, I think the fact that we see now immunotherapy being used earlier and earlier is exactly what we wanted to see. We tested it in smoldering myeloma, but likely newly diagnosed myeloma, the data would be the same. And the hope is that you use it early, bispecific, trispecific, CAR-T, whatever it is, but we're giving choices to our patients, and that's the beauty of it.
The toxicity profile of cilta-cel was all as expected in this population. So, we really didn't see any high-grade cytokine release syndrome events, which was really encouraging. All the hematologic toxicity was expected and resolved, so there were no delayed hematologic toxicity events at all. The only thing we did see were some of these non-ICANS neurotoxicity events. 4 of those were cranial nerve palsies that resolved, and we have 3 patients that have very mild motor symptoms that have had improvement that still persist at the time of the data cutoff. But despite some of these, safety findings that we saw in this study, the universal MRD negativity rate that was seen in this trial was one of the first times we've ever seen that kind of depth of response in patients with high-risk smoldering myeloma. And we're hoping that with long-term follow-up, these will remain sustained and these patients can ultimately be cured of this disease.
Yeah, we're we know about the toxicity profile of cilta-cel. There was nothing new here that we observed, which was very good to see. The good thing about it is we did not see the very severe toxicities that we expect in other disease settings. And we're hoping, again, with long follow-up, we will be able, with different dosing, different schedules, we're able to see what our patients can tolerate well with less toxicity and high benefit as we're seeing right now. It's exciting. I actually got a text today in the morning from one of my patients saying, "Oh, I've been MRD negative for over 5 years now." And he's a patient in China, so I received CAR-T early on. Am I cured? And that feeling that you're cured is a very different feeling. That you are without evidence of disease and without any therapy is a freeing feeling, because for many years we would tell our patients, yes, you have remission, but we never dare to say the word cure. And it's a very different feeling for you to say, I'm cured, I am done with this disease. And we hope that we will be able to tell our patients more and more with extra confidence, you are cured. So I think we're beginning to see that. We are excited, but our patients are even more excited than us.
Yeah, no, I can't add much more to that. I think there's so much enthusiasm about these therapies, and we hope that we can offer therapies like this to all patients with multiple myeloma, and hopefully one day also with high risk smoldering myeloma, to really just prevent this debilitating disease in all patients. And I think access is always sometimes a bit of a challenge, especially with these more specialized therapies. But I think this data will hopefully again encourage more trials in this space, which will then lead to ultimately more approvals that can help patients.